Okay, everybody, here to give you the latest update on where we're at with the new WRC code that's coming at us all in July. I'm gonna go ahead and just go through this slide deck presentation. This is what the state's been presenting to all kinds of different organizations. Kind of gives you a high level of what's going on with it, and then certainly open for questions at the end or on the way if you want. So let's go ahead and go through this. It's only like 14 slides. The question of why are they creating a code? Obviously the biggest topic is the Marshall Fire that happened recently, Black Forest. All the fires that have happened that have caused issues of, typically the biggest loss is what they call conflagration fire. That's where it gets from building to building. But really the topic with all of these fires has been where the wildland urban interface happens. We've had any of those fires where that area is burning into the neighborhood, starts the neighborhood on fire, which then it's so big at that point that the local fire department can't slow it down until the weather gives them a break or something like that. Good example, not obviously it makes sense when we're up against the forested area, but we've also had topics like the Marshall Fire, where that was a grassland fire that turned into a conflagration fire. And so the state said, at least at the legislation level, said we need to put some kind of fire code in place, which they did. And next slide, here's the act that was put together in 23. That gave us our marching orders to create a board, and create a fire code. That needs to be implemented statewide. Go to the next slide. The other topic on the backside of all that is insurance, which wasn't on the slide. A lot of insurance companies are leaving the state right now, have been because of the wildfires, and their message is, you need to put some kind of state code in place, otherwise we can't insure it. And I don't know if any of you have a house that's in a forested area. I do. Example was I sent mine out to the broker and had 18 different companies he went to, and 3 said, we'll consider it. Took one of those and they dropped it after the first year I was there. So, going to be a statewide issue also on the insurance side. So we also need to do something to keep them involved. So where does the code apply? It's any identified WUI area. There's a map, we'll get to that later in the slides. And where does it affect? It's any new construction of structures and defensible space around those structures in residential and commercial. Any significant alterations, additions, or repairs, that's 500 square foot increase in the footprint of a structure, or 25% of an exterior of a structure that's affected. So if you're replacing more than 25% of the siding on your home, you're going to have to replace it with ignition-resistant material. What it doesn't apply to is any interior alterations of existing structures, 35 acres plus, with only one residential unit on the 35 acres. Same topic there. If you're not defending your area and your house burns, you're not affecting your neighbor. That's why the larger parcels are not included. And then any exterior painting, staining, or similar types of maintenance work does not apply. Next slide. What is the WUI? I don't know why it's not on there. Is there a description somewhere? Oh, interesting. There it is. It is that wildland urban interface, and that's what this code applies to. It is that point. It is not, and there was a lot of discussion of this at the board, they really want to stop the conflagration, right? They don't want to have these massive fires where the buildings are all taken out. That is a conflagration fire. That is a building code topic. When you're talking about protecting from building to building, that's more of a building code topic. What they really want in this code is to try to stop a fire coming from the wildland area and entering into those areas. So we're talking about that buffer space before you get to that area. Click on that. it only took us like 3 meetings to come up with that one sentence that we all agreed on. But that's the definition of the code. Okay, so in the code there, and you'll see in the map, there's 3 levels of fire intensity. There's low, there's moderate, and there's high. And the colors on the map are yellow, and the orange, and then red for high. There was a lot of discussion about trying to have 3 different levels of hardening. At the end, we came to the conclusion, let's just do 2. This is supposed to be minimum code, and it's already gonna be confusing enough without throwing in another level of hardening. So we combine moderate and high. So what we have is low, which is, you'll see on the map, it's basically some of your grassland areas or areas without much vegetation. And then there's class 2, which is all the moderate and the high area, and it has more requirements regarding hardening of structure. So we have both hardening of structure to look at, and we also have defensible space topics. Obviously, if we can clear, like this example shows, if you can clear a lot of the fuel away from a property or a structure, it's gonna limit the ability for that structure to catch on fire. So there's different zones, there's zone 1, 2, and 3 on defensible space, and on the low fire intensity, the class 1, we really have to do the first 5 feet. On moderate and high, which is class 2, you have to do 1, 2, and 3 if your property line goes that far. It does stop at the property line. So, like I said, 2 main topics you have to deal with: structure hardening and then defensible space and site management. Okay, next slide. On the structure hardening side, on class 1, pretty minimal. You have to have a class A roof assembly. Most, I can't think of any asphalt shingle or composite shingle is already class A rated. The other part, so things that aren't gonna be allowed are cedar shake, they're not allowed. Anything that doesn't have that class A rating. If it doesn't have that rating, you do have the ability to put some underlayment under it if you're trying to get to something that some of the other composite type materials. But shake shingle itself is pretty much off the table because of the ember casting that happens with those shake shingles when they do catch on fire. Gutters and downspouts need to be a metal gutter and downspout. And the vents, they need to have a 1/8 inch screen on them to keep the embers from blowing in through the eaves or through the vents on the roof. You go to the next class. Next slide. That's class 2. This is all the moderate and high areas, which is the majority of what the buoy is on the map. Now, you have to add to what happens in class 1, you have to add the exterior wall hardening, eaves, underfloor structures, appendages, projections, windows, doors, decking, detached accessory structures. Again, trying to figure out how to keep the fire from getting into the structure. Next slide. A little more on the hardening topic. Class 1, like I said, you've got the roofing. The other thing that's included with on the roofing requirement is in the valley areas where we have normally a metal valley flashing, they're also requiring a 36 inch wide, and there's a UL rating for it, membrane that you put down the valley to protect it. And the reason for that is when you have a fire and the wind's blowing, a lot of the ember casts are landing in the valleys, and so they're trying to protect that valley from burn through. So that's an additional cost, but it makes sense. The gutters and downspouts we talked about, vents we talked about. You also have to do zone 1 on the class 1 area. That's the site defensible space, and that's basically rock around the house. Combustible products like bark are not allowed up against it. common sense again, embers blow up against the house, they land down at the bottom of the house, you don't wanna have bark there to catch the bark on fire and start your house. Also retaining walls, same topic, if you have a retaining wall up against your house, you don't want the embers blowing against that, starting a retaining wall on fire gives it enough fuel to start your house on fire. And then here's a big topic, is fencing. Cedar fencing in the WUI area is not gonna be allowed. Again, same topic, and this for the first 8 feet. So that means if you have a urban lot, urban environment, where you have a regular wing fence and a fence down the property line, 5 feet from the property line, that wing fence and the fence in between the property to within 8 feet, outside of 8 feet, has to be either a non-combustible material, or we have gotten to where they're allowing vinyl. After much debate and argument. Vinyl is not a non-combustible product, but it is a product that just melts.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of fuel load there. So we finally got over that knothole after much discussion. But that is at least an affordable product that we can put in there. Then when you jump to class 2, now you're talking about protecting the structure more. Now we're gonna need to protect the eaves, exterior walls. That's the exterior wall covering. In the code, you'll see there's a variety of things you can use. Non-combustible obviously makes sense. Ignition resistant material makes sense. But when you get to, and one of the things that is allowed, if you have a type X 1 hour exterior assembly, you can put vinyl siding on that. But vinyl is allowed on that type X, but not a wood product. Same comment there. We talked about a lot of different wood products and what would work and what wouldn't work. Fire departments are really concerned about if we allow a wood combustible product. If somebody puts cedar on the side of their house and that cedar catches on fire, you've got a lot of ember cast, you've got a huge fuel load, which potentially affects the house next door. So they said yes, well, they were comfortable with vinyl because the vinyl again will melt and fall off. And then the type X is there to protect the house. But when you see that in there, you'll see all these selections. There's an exception that says, if it's vinyl siding, you can use some products above to protect the house. Underfloor areas, which makes sense, decking. On the decking product, we ended up with a lot of discussion about decking. And at the end of the day, we ended up with the current structure that we typically do today with 2x material is fine for the structure itself. So the joists and the headers and all those products. But the decking surface needs to be a composite material, and it needs to be at least a Class B fire rating. That will cost, we use at our company, we use composite material today, but it's not Class B rated. When you go to B rated, it's costing us about $3.50 a foot more. So it's expensive. But the thought process there is if we're using that product, if embers blow on top of it, it won't burn through in a quick period of time. Or if the fire's from the bottom, and even if it does catch the structure portion on fire, it again will not burn through in a quick fashion. Gives them, at that point, the fire's probably gonna pass by. Appendages and projections, we still don't understand what those are exactly because we had lots of talk about that. It's usually just decorative brackets, those kinds of things. Exterior glazing, on that it was required to have the easy button on that one. As long as you have a multi-pane glass window, you're fine. But there's a lot of other ones that also qualify. That's a very typical window. We also had a lot of discussion about it needing to be a 20-minute window. And I pointed out that that doesn't exist. The 20-minute window today does not meet the energy code requirements that's required. So they finally got past that. Vinyl window with multi-plane glass is fine. Does not have to be tempered, which is another topic. But you do have to put a non-combustible trim around it. Reason being, trying to protect that vinyl frame and the flanges as much as we possibly can. Exterior doors have to be a 20-minute rated door. vehicle access door perimeter gap, that's just to flash the rubber around the outside, which is pretty the requirement on that is what they normally install anyway. I can't read the bottom because your little screen sharing thing goes away. Okay, detached accessory structures, if it's within 50 feet of your house, that structure also has to be protected. Same topic, we don't want someone having a tough shit up against their house and that starts on fire, which starts their house on fire. There is a size limit on that, I don't remember what it is. And then structure so then if you're in that class 2 hardening, as far as the defensible space goes, you have to also add zone 2, which is from 5 to 30 feet, and zone 3, which is 30 to 100. Again, it stops at your property line because you can't really enforce you to do something on the neighbor's property. Okay, next slide. Component requirements. They're talking here about, okay, this is more about the wall coverings, ignition resistant rated construction material, either that or non-combustible, fire resistant rated construction material, fire treated wood, heavy timber, log, construction, Class A tested material, and ASTM or UL test compliant. That last item right there is something we talked a lot about. California's had a fire code for 18 years now, Chapter 7A they call it, and they have their own state fire marshal list of products that have met their requirements, and tried really hard to try to get that accepted in Colorado because they've already created a long list and a lot of material suppliers have met their rating, but the state here was not comfortable using with the California State Fire Marshal's requirements. So, any product that's out there that says we meet the WUI requirements, you really need to go look and make sure that they meet ASTM E84 or the UL numbers that are in the code, not that they met the WUI requirement for the state of California. There's a couple of things evidently that they've allowed that don't really match exactly what the ASTM E84 is. So our state wasn't comfortable stating that their codes were fine here. And that will be a big issue for a lot of the suppliers because they have that rating over there and they're like, okay, now I have to spend money to get my same product rated again. Unfortunately, yes, that's what has to happen. Okay, next slide. Site management, class 1, depth of signage and addressing. There's a retaining wall topic that we addressed, fencing that we talked about, and it's just the first 5 feet in the structure. Class 2, next one. Class 2, you have to have all of 1, plus you have to have the additional requirements that are in the code for 5 to 30 feet, and the zone 3 is 30 to 100. And it's just a different level of thinning as you go out, which makes sense. Okay, next slide. Okay, the map. We pretty much argued about the map from the second month to the last hour before we adopted the draft of the code. Class 1 is anything that's the yellow, which you can see a few yellow areas on there. Class 2 is anything that's the orange or the red. When you zoom in, and you can be able to go right to the website and look at your area, you'll see these big hexagons, or 1/4 mile hexagons. What they tried to do was blend where this started from was the Colorado State Forest Service map. So if you want to understand the underlying data, you can go to their site. It's more detailed, it's 20 meter squares, almost too detailed. So the thought was, how do we blend that to, if there's one little red spot and the rest is all orange, does that mean that whole area is orange? Is it on just that parcel? How does it affect it? They tried to blend it, had some discussions about trying to follow roads or parcels or something. Bottom line, didn't have enough time to do all of that. Really didn't have any other map source to pull from that was, well, that they didn't have to pay for, and that could be done in time. The state Forest Service, like everybody, or state fire, also realizes that they don't have any additional funding for this. It was an unfunded mandate from the legislation. So they're trying to figure out what they can work with. So they took the Colorado State Forest Service map. And the Forest Service will tell you, we did not design our map for this. We do have a fire intensity map, but it wasn't meant to be for a code. But that's what we used. On there are lots of inaccuracies, let's put it that way. And not enough time to go into each area and clean it all up. So the solution to that was, we'll allow the state says, let's allow the local, what they call authorities having jurisdiction, in most cases it's the fire department, allow those people to go out and do ground truthing, they call it. And a good example of that would be if you have a development that's 200 acres and you've graded it all off completely, there's no longer vegetation there, so there's no longer a fire hazard. That wildfire hazard is not there anymore. And so they came, after a lot of discussion about how big a buffer should be, they came up with a solution of, you can go to your local authority having jurisdiction and ask them that you would like to have that ground truthed out and say, look, I've already graded all this out. I no longer have a wildfire problem or wildland interface issue. And it says, as long as you have a 300-foot buffer, whether inside inside of that development property line or outside of it. Obviously, if it's outside of it, you would have to control it as the owner, right? That you can maintain that 300-foot buffer to make sure we don't have this issue of the wildland making its way in and causing conflagration. So that's what's in place today. Is if you have a parcel of ground, if you don't own anything around it, you just own that parcel, your 300 feet is inside of your boundary. And you could ground truth out the middle of it. Or if you own it around it, you could obviously have a 300-foot buffer around it, or a combination of the two. But that means you have to get with your fire department. We've already been talking to 3 of them in our area, trying to put together what this process looks like, because there is no process. Right now, the way the code's written, you get an outside expert, they write a report, give it to the fire district says, yep, that works for me, that makes sense, they go inspect it, yep, everything's gone, we can ground truth this out. You have to have a fire district that's willing to do that. You know, they could just say, no, I don't want to do that. You have to figure out what the fire district requires as far as an expert to give them a report. And all of the districts are in the same boat right now, and they're all kind of asking the same questions and struggling a little bit trying to figure out how to get it all implemented. So realize that is a real gray area, and everybody's scrambling trying to figure out what to do with it. We tried to get, as the board, tried to get more detail put in just so that the authorities having jurisdiction knew what to do with all of these things. But we had 18 months to put the whole code in place. And evidently, I've never been on a code board before, but the people that were on this board that had been before, they're like, you create a new code, that's a minimum of 3 years, so.
That's the ICC.
We went fast. And it's not 100% product, but it's the first time out, we realized it wouldn't be 100% product from the get-go. Gets updated again in 3 years. So any comments, feedback, all that stuff, we're keeping track of all of that so we can update 2 years from now, 3 years from now. So anyway, ground truthing is a big deal. It's just gonna be a question of how we get it implemented in each area. Because every fire district's asking the same question going, I don't even really know exactly what I need to ask you for. So I'm sure we'll have more on that as the year goes along. There is a peer exchange group that's been involved statewide. Some of you have already probably been listening to it. And they're all asking those same questions, trying to get to the finish line on that as quick as they can. Okay, next. Okay, so governing bodies shall either adopt the state map or develop their own local map. There's the QR code for the state map. Some areas right now, just because of the timeline, they have to adopt this code by April 1st. And most of them are like, they're still trying to figure out what ground truthing is, much less trying to redo a map. So they're like, okay, we'd like to redo the map, but we don't have time to figure that out right now, or the resources to pay for it. I'm sure there are some fire districts that are doing it. I know City of Colorado Springs is trying to submit their map. And we're still waiting to have our subject matter experts. We need some volunteers for the petition committee so that they can review it, make sure everything's accurate with the GIS and the loading, the fuel loading, all those topics. So that's the idea, is if you want to change, if the local area wants to change their map, they submit that to that committee, the committee reviews it. If it's easy, that committee can approve it. If not, and then just send it to the board almost administratively. If not, we'll have discussion at the board level of whether or not to approve the maps that are being submitted. The ground truthing does not have to be sent anywhere. It just has to be approved by the fire district that's in charge. That was intentional, that we don't need to have, if that development, I'm talking, example, 200 acres, it's been graded off. We know where the 300-foot boundary is, and the fire professional's gone out and looked at it. The state board doesn't need to question whether that person knows what he's looking at. It's so, and that would take too long, right? That process would be another, go to the petition committee, then the next board meeting, and then I just thought we thought that was too much regulation for something where we could just let the professionals make their decisions. Like they know better than we're gonna know anyway. So that's if you want to adjust your map to a different classification of moderate or high or low. But ground truthing is done at the jurisdiction level. Okay, next. Who shall adopt the code? It's statewide, so it's gonna be that authority having jurisdiction, so it's the city council, town council, any governing body that's in charge of that for their area. Most of those then have a fire district under them, whether it's sometimes it's a county or a city. They'll pass it down to the fire district. And improvement districts that have fire protection services, they can approve it. And then county commissioners for areas that are outside of a city limit or outside of a fire protection district. That last one is an example would be El Paso County, where I'm from. We have fire protection districts in most of the county, but there's sections of it that don't have a fire district. The county is then responsible to do these things. Who enforces the code? It's whoever that authority having jurisdiction is. So it's either going to be the fire department, or it's going to be, in some cases where there is no fire district, the county. Fallback is if districts do not take it, it sounds like the state will have to do the inspections. And that would be the worst case scenario, because they don't have any money either. They're able to get 2 people to help temporarily stand this thing up. So just picture having to send all of your site plans to the state to have them approve the site plan and then have them come out and do a hardening inspection. You don't want to go that route if you don't have to. Okay, next. Timeline. So we adopted the code, or the draft version of the code, in July of 25. Has to be adopted by the jurisdictions by April 1st, and then it will kick in July 1st of 26. So this July, the new code will be in place. And is that it? There's the website. Obviously, you're not going to be able to click on that link. But if you go on the Wildfire Resiliency Code Board, if you search that, you'll see the website. Pull it up, codes on there, maps on there, rules are on there. Is that enough?
Do we have any questions in the room? Oh,
So
sorry.
that July 1st trigger, that's on all new permits submitted after? It's not ongoing construction prior to that?
Correct. Any new permits pulled out after that date, is what will apply. And an example would be, not all the rules are gonna be the same. Like in El Paso County, we have the city of Colorado Springs, and they want certain things, and they want it sent to them. In the county, we're trying to convince the county to do the site, and to create a template that everybody, all the other districts in the county like, and that the county would potentially approve it using that template. They haven't agreed to do that yet, because they don't want the extra workload. But we have some areas, we have volunteer fire departments that you could send a site plan over there and not get a response for whenever somebody shows up. So we're trying to figure out how to do that. I'm sure the rest of the state's gonna be in the same boat. But, it's fun.
I'm guessing the answer to this is no, but at the local level, is there any ability to amend or opt out, even if you're home rule? Is there any?
No,
None.
yep. No, the home rule thing came up really early in the process, and they were like, no. State came down on, said that wouldn't apply.
I have a question on the ground true thing. Your example of the 200 acres, you've cleared it, you've graded it, there's no vegetation. Is there at any point, once development is done and landscaping and everything is back in, that you have to go through that again, or not if you maintain your 300-foot barrier?
Good question. It would probably not change. If anything, it'll probably get removed. And why it would get removed is every 3 years, the Forest Service flies the state. And when they fly the state, they look at it and they look at it with LiDAR and everything and say, okay, this is an urban area. And this is we can tell by the air that we think this fuel load is this. And that's why there's problems with the map, is because none of this was checked out on the ground.
Right.
It was like, what did it look like from the sky? And so, example would be, we have a parcel of ground that's 600 acres that doesn't have enough grass on it to put cattle on it, and yet they called it moderate. Because that's what, according to their aerial, the fuel loading was enough that it was moderate. Next time they fly that, it could be low. Or it could be very low, which wouldn't affect it at all. So they're like, well, it depends on what year we fly it, and how much grass is grown, and whether or not what we picked up from the air is correct. And again, like they said, we didn't design this to be that level of detail. So what would happen is, if you build that 200 acres, and let's say you start developing all of it, and you put houses in there, more than likely when they fly that in that 3-year cycle, it'll show up as urban. It'll just be removed.
Well, in the case of the Marshall Fire, when they flew that, Superior, Louisville, that was all urban. And
Except for the grass the grass came right up to the fence line.
abutted it, got it.
The comment that the fire people have made is that if there was a 25-foot mowed section between the grassland and the cedar fences,
It wouldn't.
that would have never happened. But it said it was native all the way up to, because it was open space.
Yeah.
Nobody maintained it.
Any other questions in the room? If not, how about online? Any questions? Just come off mute.
No.
None online?
One more quick one. So
No.
I would imagine the only way to execute this is with a third-party expert, right, doing the inspections? Or do you know of any,
For the hardening side of it, or,
just performing the inspections? Like,
yeah,
similar to a steel inspection in a foundation or something like that, instead of the building department or the fire district
yeah,
getting that third-party expert.
yeah.
Do you have any companies that are?
Well, we're asking our fire districts, who will you accept? Cause
But
it's
there is
very,
no-
it's very open in there as to who can do the inspections intentionally. They're kind of pushing that to the authority having jurisdiction to say, so the fire district could say, I'm comfortable with a home inspector looking at it. Or I need someone with a certification to go look at it. We don't know, fire district's probably different. Colorado Springs Fire Department, they wanna do their own. And the reason they wanna do their own is because we already have a WUI on the west side of town and have for years. So they have a process in place already for the WUI on the hillside, the Wildfire area. They're just like, we're just gonna expand that, cause we already know how that functions. But other fire districts we're talking to, this is all brand new game for them, and they're like, we don't have anybody to go do these things.
Yeah, that's why I don't see it happening, and I mean,
Yeah,
in Denver, with what, 27 different municipalities still?
I wish it was only 27.
Is it more than that now?
Yeah.
yeah. So we're locally down there, and we've got a meeting Monday with there's a group that is of all of the fire districts in the county. They're meeting to try to figure out something that's consistent. I'll be going to that to ask them, just brainstorm. What do you guys need? Cause they're all in the same boat. We don't have anybody to go do this. How do we do this? And so, the things that needed to be inspected are really pretty simple. On the outside of, if you get into class 2. Class 1 is so, I wouldn't say it's so easy, but it's pretty simple to the point where Colorado Springs Fire Department, they're comfortable with us giving them an affidavit that says, here's the products we're putting in the house. They're not even gonna inspect those. Class 2, you have to check that the siding is non-combustible, so it's hardy board, it's a cementous siding, it's a stucco, stone, whatever. You have to protect the bottom edge of that siding, because the siding hangs down, the OSB sheeting is exposed on the bottom edge, and the embers fly up against the house and burn, and that's how it gets in, right? It comes in through that edge. So you have to protect that edge. We're just gonna use 1/2 inch, fire treated plywood, 6-inch strip. Pretty simple to put on, not that expensive. So that's how we're gonna deal with it as a company. There's other ways if you wanna put flashing or something like that under there. So you have to check. Is it the right kind of siding on the outside? Is the gap on the bottom right? Is it dual pane windows? Well, yeah, it can't be energy code without it. Is the roof a class A roof? If it's composite, it's class A. Is there screens on the soffit vents? 20-minute front door, which you can get we're getting our stuff from the door manufacturer, so that's fine. That's really it. We're trying to get our building department to do those
That's what I was gonna
inspections.
say, it seems logical to have them do it, but I
But
can't
ours
imagine
won't,
that's.
ours won't do it, but I know other counties that they are. Gunnison County has been doing what they call it's the IWOOD, it's the International Wild and Urban Interface Code, they've had it for years. But they're a county that also does the building, so they do their own site inspections, they do their own site plan approval, they have 5 different fire districts. They said, we came up with a template. Their building department goes and inspects it. And so, and then their fire departments go check the site after the fact, especially if it's a wooded area. If it's urban, they're not worried, they're not as concerned about it. So, yeah, if your building department's not willing to do it, then you're in the same boat as we are where we have to find somebody else.
Yeah, in Denver, I would imagine it's gotta be a third party, so they gotta figure out who's got the authority to do it.
Yeah,
And that's just if the legislation calls out for a municipality, a fire district, or a county where fire districts aren't. It doesn't say anything about a regional building department that stands alone. So they're not called out in the legislation as an authority to do it, so they don't wanna do it.
but yeah, they don't wanna do it because, yeah, they don't want,
No,
they
they're
want
not
more thing to
specifically
do.
called out.
But it's up to the authority having jurisdiction to accept whoever's doing the inspection. There's no reason locally for us that our fire department wouldn't say, yeah, that's an acceptable inspector, I'll take that. Unfortunately, our building department doesn't want to do it. But it could be as easy as, because those items are really easy to look at, you don't really need much of training to look at those things, that they'll accept the home inspector. I mean, those guys are
That'd be
going,
the easiest.
they take hundreds of items on a house, and much more complicated than looking to see if the siding's right, and there's a protected gap, and, you know, it's pretty simple, it's 10, 15 minutes really.
And it's up to every district to set their own permit fees for this? I would imagine.
Correct,
Yes.
yep, and that's what they're trying to figure out is, boy, if we have to do the inspections, does that mean we gotta hire people? We gotta charge you for it. We do have a example with the fire department in the Springs with the WUI that they have. When we have a house that's in the WUI, we pay another, gosh, $450, I think it is, for them to set the site plan, to go out to the site, to do the hardening inspection, and then go back out and make sure that everything got done as it's supposed to be. So yeah, it's not immaterial. On the cost side of it, everybody's like, how much is it gonna cost, right, to do this stuff? It depends on what your starting point is. We already use some extra siding on our houses. So we don't have any, the cost we have is the fire treated plywood 6-inch strip. That's maybe $250 for a house. The screens and the soffit vents is, we already do those on our other WUI area, and it's like maybe $10, cause we're allowed to actually use just a metal screen. You don't have to have a rated vent, which was a win during that whole process, cause the rated vents are like $50 piece. We already have plastic shingle. We already have a multi-pane window. The only really cost for us was mostly the roof, because you have to put that extra layer
Is that a
under
piece
the
of
valves.
water shield or?
No, it's a rated fire, it's got some kind of fire rating to it, it's in the code, it just has to be this number. And the roofing companies have it. They're just like, yeah, we know what you're talking about. So you do that, the vents, and then the step flashing, wherever you go from the roof to a house, to the wall, where you normally have the 5x4 step flashing, metal flashing going up the shingles, has to be a 6x4, because the code calls for a 6-inch protection against that house. So, for us, that was, typical house for us was about $600 to pay for the valley flashing, extra vents, and step flashing. The other things we already do, so it didn't really affect our cost much. We're, all in, we're probably $800 to $1,000.
That's using a hardy site, is it like an LP smart site, not?
No.
No.
It's not even flat?
That's
No.
not.
We
that's
did
not-
check, we do have one of our product lines where we still use, it's a hardboard product, and we would have to switch to hardy board. And that ended up about, depending on the size of the house, $800 to $1,200 to go to hardy. So,
Well, remember LP is a composite material.
Hold on, we're recording,
so anyway, so yeah, there's some cost, but there's been numbers thrown out there, it's just gonna be $20,000, or it's gonna be $30,000. I don't see it, but we're not starting from a standpoint of saying vinyl siding. I don't know how much less that is than some interest. And then the board is commissioned Headwater Economics to do a cost study analysis, because everybody's asking the question of how much it costs, so they're doing that. Probably won't have that till the end of the first
and it will
quarter.
be very low, that's what Headwaters does.
I was not happy with their first one that came
Yeah.
out, that said it was actually less money.
Yeah,
And then when I looked at it, it was like, well, their base siding was cedar siding.
yeah,
I was like, well,
That's what-
you
that's
you
what
start with
everybody
that,
does.
you got all kinds of money to play with.
Okay, well, Joe, thank you so much for being here and
Sure.
doing this.